Good morning.
That's all right.
That's right.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am pinch hitting here for a little while until Jan gets here. My name is Pat White, and welcome to the first Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta.
Thank you.
We are going to open today with our opening congregational song, which is on page 13, and it is "We Gather Together." So please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able to join in singing "We Gather Together."
This morning, my worst nightmare came true. I overslept. And I had nightmares about oversleeping. I was supposed to facilitate. And I looked at my clock, it was 10:24. I was like, oh my God! On masculine person. Okay, thank you so much for that. We are a philosophically based spiritual community. You haven't done this yet, right? Dedicated to human liberation and founded on existentialist and feminist principles. By existentialist principles, we mean that we are what we do in the world, and we accept responsibility for our choices and our actions. By feminist principles, we mean that we accept and actively support freedom and justice for every person. We support diversity as a source of strength, and we actively include in everyone. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Mesquite Creek people, and we support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. At this time, I'd like to remind you to please put your electronic devices on silent, which I'll do in just a second. Feel free to wander around, but please do so quietly and respectfully. Our speaker today is Franklin Abbott, a longtime friend of First D, whose topic is Renaissance. Looking at Franklin's topic, I made the assumption that it would have something to do with finding our way back to a beautiful world after these past 2 years of isolation, politicization, misunderstandings, introspection, and fear, among so many other feelings that we may not have even known we had. And it would also be the first day of spring today. Yay! So I think we'd be talking about that too. And after talking to Franklin, I found out, yeah, I was right. This is pretty much what he was going to talk about for the most part. But Franklin said he was very concerned about the events in Ukraine. I think he put it, channeling his inner Hitler, which was well put. And he felt that he might have to delve into that as well. I'm not sure what he decided, but I know the situation in Ukraine is distressing for all of us. And whether or not Franklin chooses to talk about it, we should all be keeping it in our hearts and our minds and doing whatever it is we can. But I'm not going to focus on that. I want to talk about our reopening, not only as a congregation, but as people coming out from under a gigantic rock. How many of you have had some misgivings about returning to the in-house COLs? I know I have. As an introvert, I really didn't seem to have a problem with staying home and being by myself. The coronavirus gave me an excuse to not have to go out or talk to people, and I actually enjoyed it. I'm one of those who thought that the years 2020 and 21 were, might be the best years ever. But after these past 2 years, I had to take a good, long look at myself. I've gotten lazy. I've let things go in my house that I never would have before, and my whole thought was, well, man, who's going to see it? And, I started to gain weight. The funny thing is, that's only just been in the last few months, but put on some pounds here. And with the added weight came a bigger load manifesting on my body aches and my knees, which have always been bad. Back aches. But the worst may be the mind-numbingness of it all. I think I just kind of realized that, I don't even know how to put it, I just wasn't thinking right. Or not thinking at all, maybe. I started thinking that with all these manifestations and, negative things, that maybe I wasn't enjoying my isolation as much as I perhaps thought I was. And I really needed to be around people, to get out, to get busy, to try to put a stop to this digression. And last week proved that for me. Seeing all your faces, just being here in this space was a joy for me. And I hope I'm in a better position now to move forward. I even shaved my legs yesterday. It's like for the first time in 2 years. Anyway, this is the first day of spring, and we should celebrate it. And I got a few quotes for you. It's spring fever. That is the name of it. That's what the name of it is. And when you've got it, you want, you don't quite know what it is you want to do, but it just barely makes your heart ache. You want it so. And that's from Mark Twain. It was such a spring day as breathes into a man an ineffable yearning, a painful sweetness, a longing that makes him stand motionless, looking at the leaves of grass, and fling out his arms to embrace he knows not what. From John Galsworthy. I can still bring into my body the joy I felt at seeing the first trillium of spring, which seemed to be telling me, never give up hope, spring will come. That was from Jessica Stern. It is spring again. The earth is like a child that knows a poem's by heart. I love that one. Rainier Maria Rilke. And from the incomparable Robin Williams, spring is nature's way of saying, let's party. Okay, we'd now like to recognize any newcomers that might be with us today. Or if you've only been here once or twice, or are you guys new? I can't tell with your mask on.
I've been here a couple of weeks.
Well, can you, who you are, can you stand up and tell us your name? I can't.
Hi.
Hey, so we've been here before, but
Oh, okay.
Just once.
I'm sorry, it's hard to tell with mask on.
Yeah.
no worries. We were here 2 weeks ago, and last week we were out of town. But yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, great, thanks for coming back. Yay. I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. What are your names?
Stan, and this is
Martina.
Martina, I'm Jan.
Yeah.
You know everybody else.
Yes.
got the name for it.
We love it when people come back.
We're not new, but we're not recent either, because we haven't been here or really been involved since COVID. But I'm Kristen. I'm Ava.
Kristen, I recognize you from mask. I knew that was you.
Oh, you did?
It's so good to see you. It's great to see you.
And,
At least I thought it was you.
yes, well, I'm here to confirm that it is. And we're here, and my daughter, Ava, had the idea to come, and I'm just so glad. It's just so wonderful singing here with you guys.
Oh, Ava, thank you for shoving your mom out the door. This is now the time to celebrate anyone who is present, who may be celebrating a milestone, like a birthday or an anniversary or something else. Joe?
All right.
It's your birthday, Joe? It's your birthday, your birthday. All right, everybody, ready? Can we get a happy birthday? And Bill Laney, yay! Okay, so we'll do Joe first.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joe. Happy birthday
except this year. 15 minutes.
Yeah, March is kind of an eventful, not eventful month, just one of those months for me too. My grandmother's birthday, March 12th. Let's see, she would be 118, I believe. And my mother died on March 5th and my brother on March 15th. So this has been one of those months that's very reflective for me. All right. We're going to do another song.
The list is right there on the podium there.
Okay. So we're going to do Song of Peace on page 77.
This is my
Okay, I don't think you have any children here, but I'm not going to mention the youth program except to say that for the time being, we're asking for reservations to be made a week ahead of time if you desire childcare. We don't have any kids, right? If anybody has any community announcements, please bring them up and I will read them later in the service. Robert, do we have anything to write on back there? Okay, you go, Robert. Since it's first day spring, I thought it would be fun to include some quotes about spring cleaning. And I don't know who wrote any of these. You know that amazing feeling when you go to bed knowing that your entire house is clean? Yeah, neither do I. Spring cleaning is really just putting all your things in less obvious places. I can't believe it's already time to put off spring cleaning until next year. I'm going to start spring cleaning my house today. And by cleaning, I mean drinking wine and spraying everything with Febreze. That's my idea. This spring, I'm cleaning out everything. So yes, I'm taking a decongestant and a laxative. There's that moment when you're supposed to be starting your spring cleaning and you put on music and it turns into a dance party for one. And I love that one because I just remember when I was a kid, my mom and I, she'd put her music on and we would just dance around the house while we cleaned. It was a good memory for me. Is Marcia here? Yeah. Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask our fellowship minister, Marcia Mitchner, to give us some of her words of wisdom.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm even more excited that you're here. It's so great to see everyone and to be back in this wonderful space. This, it's been, I guess for the past month, it's been one of those situations where every time I turn on the TV, I'm very concerned about what's going on in Ukraine, and I think about when I came in this morning and I read this again, in Unity There is Strength, and I think about how this country, the people in this country have really come together to try to stand up for what they believe, for their country, for their land, for their, what is their experience, and they don't want somebody else coming in and taking it away. I really admire that courage and stuff, but I have to think every day, because my biggest hope is that we can figure out, the powers that be can figure out some way to stop the madness and insanity, because there's so many people that are innocent people that are being lost in this, and the infrastructures and things that are being destroyed will make it so much harder when people do get back. So I hope you will just, think about those that are really struggling in Ukraine, but also to think about those that are struggling here. It's not always, something that's so obvious on the news, but there are a lot of people that are struggling in whatever kind of ways. And so just to hold them in your heart and do whatever you can to bring peace and love into the world.
Amen. Great. Thank you, Marcia. Marcia, this one is for you. In the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt. Marcia loves to work in the yard. It's now time for joys, sorrows, milestones, and this is time to briefly share those things that have meaning for us or to you. And this is really important to me, an important part of COL. You can stand and be heard. I have a few quotes about coming out to the world after being in for so long. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. And that one, curiously enough, is from Madame Marie Curie, which just shows that life just goes round and round and round in a circle. So, just reference to Joni Mitchell. From Napoleon Hill, don't wait. The time will never be just right. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. That's from John Lennon. And from Paulo Coelho, whatever you decide to do, make sure it makes you happy. Yes, Joe?
I'm sorry, I was focused on myself and I feel very badly because I just realized I haven't told you that Charlie Boat, who has played piano here many, many times, fell and broke her hand. She had surgery this week. There's pins in it now. She took one pain med. She hadn't had to have them since. So, it's all going to work out, I'm sure. But if people would like to reach out, I'm sure she'd appreciate it.
Thank you. I mean, it's got to be a horrible thing for a pianist. Okay, our next congregational song is is broken page 45. 45. It's a very beautiful day. The woman looks around and thinks, there cannot ever have been a spring more beautiful than this. I did not know until now that clouds could be like this. I did not know that the sky is the sea, and that clouds are the souls of happy ships sung long ago. I did not know that the wind could be tender, like hands as they caress. What did I know until now? Because and the spring arose on the garden fair, and the spirit of love felt everywhere, and each flower and herb on earth's dark breast rose from the dreams of his wintry rest. That's from Percy Bryce Shelley. The first day of spring was much the time for taking the young virgins into the fields, their dalliance to set an example in fertility for nature to follow. Now we just set the clocks an hour ahead and change the oil in the crankcase. It's E.B. White. And these next two are from my friend, Anonymous. Spring, where have you been all winter? And dear winter, I'm breaking up with you. It's time I start seeing other seasons, like spring. He gives me flowers. Or summer. He's hotter than you. Okay. I just want to give you a reminder to bring your community announcements to me, and I'll read them after the speaker. And our featured speaker today is Franklin Abbott. I always enjoy it when Franklin speaks because he's so full of life and joy, and it's just always a pleasure to listen to him talk, to recite his poetry, or to sing us a song. It's just always a joy. And I don't know what he has in store for us today, but I'm sure it's going to be wonderful, as always. Franklin has been a practicing psychotherapist in Atlanta for 40 years. He's also a poet, a musician, a community organizer, and an amateur oral historian. His connection to the congregation of the Old Stone Church go back more than 40 years to early urban radical fairy gatherings held in the sanctuary before first he became its steward. He is a frequent and beloved speaker at First E and has performed music and poetry here and has coordinated events and memorials. He and First E founding minister of Linear Plants were close friends and co-hosted an eclectic existential radio program on WRFG for over 5 years in the mid-'80s. His latest project, which is probably about a couple of years now, is a double CD of 44 original poems and 14 original songs titled Don't Go Back to Sleep. Please welcome the wonderful Franklin Abbott.
Not only has it been a long time, it's been a long And when I was asked to do the talk, we didn't know at that time whether it would be an in-person talk or if it would be a, what has been done online, which was fun. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed this more. For the obvious reasons. Let me organize myself for a second here. Not that I'm ever really organized. All right. Okay. I also was asked for a topic, and the topic that I chose was Renaissance because this is the first day of spring, and I thought that our experience with COVID was lifting, and it has, which is why we can be here, masked and distanced, and with good air filters and all of that, those of us who feel safe. And then, the world turned again. And, just as we were feeling some relief and some sense of things are getting to be okay again, we have another terrible earth event, which is the war in Ukraine. And I think that, in my recollection, there have always been wars. Somewhere on planet Earth, there has always been a war. What makes this a little bit different is that one of the combatants has nuclear arms. And many of us, I look around and I see people with my color hair, can remember as elementary school children, going through drills where we had to get under our desks, to avoid a catastrophe. And so for many of us, it brings back that old sort of boogaboo about the world not being safe, that something terrible could happen. And probably there might be one or two people here who are, who can still remember when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was certainly true of my parents' generation. That was part of what they carried, along with the Holocaust. So we have elements of both. We have elements of both. And because we have not only our cultural memory, our personal cultural memory, but the cultural memory of our parents and our grandparents, all of these things are moving us in odd ways. So I want to talk a little bit about resilience. That seemed to me to be the topic that came out of the Renaissance. We could have gone in a number of directions with Renaissance, but Renaissance is a rebirth. It is resilience. We can look all around us in nature and see the amazing resilience of the trees and the flowers. I wanted to share with you an early poem. When I came to Atlanta in my late 20s, I was sort of in a fog. I got into therapy, which was one of the better things I did for me. And life kind of opened up. And so one of the things that happened is that I started noticing things. And somewhere in the first pages of this book is the poem. Here we go. It's called Another Covenant. Every year in spring I wait for the blue iris to send its spikes over blades of the palest green, as if to penetrate heaven. I watch for a radical redirection as each indigo tip spear unfurls one petal at a time, and weapon becomes blossom. There is no wounding of the sky, only a cup for the wind and rain. When is an empty hand an open hand, when each finger of its own rhythm is warm to the softness of potter's clay, a hand becomes a vessel deep enough to harbor what is needed to fill a life. The space it redefines is not a void, but a promise. There is, in this great resilience that we're experiencing out in the world, there's also a resilience, I think, that we're experiencing in ourselves, because, more light, more warmth, more color, it does something to us, to our spirits, which most of us like. I mean, it makes me sneeze too, but I'll take the sneezing. For the flowers and the beauty. And what it reminds me of is, just how resilient we are, how we do go into, cyclically, we go into times where nothing much is happening, where we're resting. We do that, if we're lucky, we get to do that every night. And the point is that, the morning comes, we get up, we start to move again. That is our resilience. And when you think about being here right now, this right where you're sitting is the sum total of all the choices that you've made in your life. So you've made some really, really good choices. And including being right here, right now. Here we are. And it is a delight to see you in person. Many of you I have not seen in person, or only in a Zoom situation. So very, very nice to be here. We survived. We're here. There are those who did not survive, and we grieve them. Not people, simply just people lost to COVID, but people, collateral damage, people who couldn't get through it. Their medical condition, their psychological condition, they just couldn't get to the other side. But we all made choices, and here we are. And so, if I had a chalice, I would say cheers. We're here. We're here. There's a Japanese proverb that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I'm sure we've all gotten up the 8th time, and the 9th time, and there'll be a 10th time. In thinking about resilience and how we handle things, how we handle adversity, I have a trivial personal story I'd like to share with you. I was delivering a little food to a friend in need, and somehow or another, a nail jumped into one of my tires. This happens. This happens to good people. And I was very near a tire store that I had been to a number of years ago that I don't go to because I've got poor service, but the tire was flat, the alarm was going off. It was, the sensible thing to do was to go back to that particular place and get them to repair the tire. So I left it, went home, and they waited until the very end of the day, the very, very end of the day, to call me and say, well, we can't fix the tire. It went into the sidewall, and plus you need 2 other tires. And I said, okay. And they said, hey, you need a tire sensor. Well, I had a tire sensor that was, that had been just sort of flashing for a long time. I have an old car, lots of things go wrong with it, and can be allowed to just be dysfunctional. If I had a real problem with the tire, it would make a lot of noise. So I knew that I didn't have to actually know that I had 33.4 pounds of air in my tire at all times. But what they didn't say is that they had taken the old tire sensor off, thinking that I would certainly agree to have a new tire sensor put on. I was already spending a lot of money, and I thought, this can wait, this is not going to be problematic. When I drove the car away, it started beeping, and it would beep 5 times, and then it stopped, and 3 minutes later, I timed it, it beeped 5 times again. And I couldn't get the car back to the place to get it fixed. And I had to drive to Athens the next day. So that's about an hour and 20 minutes or so. That's many beeps. And I go out 78, and when I got into the Stone Mountain area, I needed to get some gas, and I called the shop and I said, I will be bringing this in on Monday. And they said, okay. So I had two choices, really. One, I could be aggravated every time that thing went off, you know, and think evil things about those people in the shop. Or, you know, I could just simply, you know, breathe a little bit and say, well, at least it's keeping me alert. So I took it back to the shop, finally, on a pretty day this past week, and they put the new tire sensor in, but then they told me when I came to get it that the car was so old, they didn't have a machine to reset the sensor. And so I'm still getting 5 beeps every 3 minutes, and I would have to find another shop that has the correct equipment. You know, this is a very minor problem. I'm lucky to have a car. I'm lucky that I can drive to another city and not worry about being stopped and, you know, challenged along the way, that I have friends that I can visit, that, you know, all of these things, you know, are much more true than the aggravation of the little beep in the car. But I say that because I think we have choices about how we deal with those little aggravations. And how we do that really indicates a lot about our resilience. You know, that, you know, I tease people sometimes in therapy and say, don't suffer over suffering. And easier said than done, but we all do that sometimes. We suffer over suffering. And I think it wears us out. It really wears us out. So the resilience piece of it has to do with, you know, it's not over till it's over. It's you know, allowing, accepting, and appreciating really the context. I'm lucky to have car problems. In thinking about the state of the world, I was reminded of a Buddhist meditation that I learned to practice some years ago. And it's called Tonglen. Many of you may have heard of it. It's spelled Tonglen. And you can go online, Google it. You'll get lots of stuff, including YouTube videos with people leading the meditation. And what it's based on simply is that we tend to close ourselves off from difficult situations. We tend to not want to look. We tend to, you know, not know what to do. We step back. And whether that be a difficult situation in our personal life or a difficult situation out there in the world that we live in, it is, you know, something that we do a great deal of. And I know that when I've been in difficult situations, oftentimes what I feel is that I tense up. You know, that I feel constricted and usually kind of helpless. And, you know, that is something that is, that's not a fun place to be. So Tonglen really, you know, what essentially you're doing is you're imagining that you're sending light out of your heart. You're breathing in and out of your heart, which is physically impossible. But on an energetic basis, you can feel energy move in and out of your heart, and that you're sending it out to, whether it's a person that you're having challenges with or a situation. And so I thought that one of the things that we can do as resilient people, as people who have a reservoir of love, is to send that energy out, you know, into this terrible situation that is happening in Europe. Terrible for everyone involved. And just make that part of our practice. You know, it helps me to have something to do where I feel like I can send something out, whether it's, like I say, to a big thing like that, or if I'm aggravated with somebody or feel harassed, you know, or, you know, I can send Tonglen out to the tire shop, you know, because why do I need to send negative energy? It's okay to be pissed, but why perpetuate that? I wanted to read a little story that I think further illustrates the point. Very short here. And the reason I decided to read it, not only is it relevant, but today is the birthday of the person that I'm reading about. Her name was Kate Harris, and she lived from 1942 to 2002. She was really one of the only gifted clairvoyants I've ever met. I've met many clairvoyants, but very few of them were clairvoyant. This little story is called "It's Easier Than You Think." I saw her 3 or 4 times a year over a decade and a half, always in her bedroom, then perfectly made, topped with frilly pillows, baby dolls, and in the beginning little dogs, and in the end old cats. She was always neat as a pin, her hair and makeup perfect, as were her polished nails. She wore print dresses and costume jewelry and looked like one of those ladies who sold silk scarves or fragrances in a department store. She always evidenced excitement upon my arrival. "How have you been?" she'd say as she beckoned. Come in, and told me that I looked great and had lost weight whether I had or not. We would sit opposite a small table pushed against the other wall of the small bedroom. In the half dozen or so places she lived, there was always the table, and hanging over it, a painting of a horse's head on tattered black velvet, framed in a burnt wood frame. There were various objects on the table, a changing cast of characters over the year, but always her water glass, the rim smeared with lipstick, and 3 pennies in a row. Before our behinds were touching our chairs, she had already cocked her head as if she could hear something I couldn't, and would often begin, "I don't know why I'm picking this up," as she launched into 45 minutes, often an hour or more, of sentence fragments and non sequiturs that described my current states of mind and affairs with the odd comment, "I'm just saying." I was always so enthralled, I never pursued my curiosity about the process. When I eventually did, and asked her, she laughed softly and only said, "It's easier than you think." She did explain the pennies on the table when I asked about them. One of her adult daughters had died of leukemia some years before. They had been very close, and the loss had been so hard on Kay, she'd stopped working for over a year. She prayed for a sign her daughter was okay in the afterlife. Her daughter's favorite song had been "Pennies from Heaven." And after Kay prayed, she began finding pennies in the most unusual and unlikely places. In a book, on her silverware, in the soap dish of her shower. And she knew through these signs her beloved daughter was held in the arms of the angels. "Go ahead," she'd say when her transmission was completed. I would take out my list of questions, most of which had already been answered unasked. She would patiently respond to the mostly inane details of my current confusion. Time had altered, and though someone else was often waiting, there was never a hurry to end. She gave me a close, strong hug at the finish and always said, "I love you." There were times when Kay's love, "I love you," was the only one I could believe. After each of our sessions, I always went to a place where I could sit down and make some notes. I've saved them, though I don't take them out, and they don't make a lot of sense nowadays. What we talked about in those encounters was really beside the point. Destiny, after all, is destiny. What changed me was not advice about boyfriends or business projects, but being in close proximity to the light of love that Kay personified. I always left in a glow. And though she is now for some years with her beloved daughter in the arms of the angel, the glow of her "I love you" shines in me still. You see, whatever the future holds, our souls are healed with love. And I know now what came, it's easier than you think. Thank you so much for inviting me today. It is, I'm getting little chill bumps standing up here looking at you, you know, and being in this lovely space. So I look forward to hanging out and seeing the pyramid and all kinds of things. But thanks again for having me in.